We do a lot of different type of videos here on this channel, but the most popular ones that we put out are the 10 smallest incorporated towns in a state. And I've now done 10 of them. And the last one was only 5 smallest towns because Arizona, their towns are so much bigger. They don't incorporate the really tiny places like a lot of other states do. So, but there's been 10 of those. Actually, I also did one about Alaska, but it was only the smallest town, and it was a whole 30-minute video, so I'm not including that here. That's its own video if you want to watch that. To go to the 10 smallest towns in Alaska would take about a month. It'd probably be a lot more expensive than I could afford. So we're not including that one in this video, but the other 10 states that I've done these smallest towns videos, we're gonna include here as the smallest, teeniest, tiniest town in each of those videos. These videos together have had over 2.5 million views, so certainly they seem to strike a chord with people. People are curious about these, smallest towns and incorporated towns, not ghost towns necessarily, and the definition of being unincorporated or no one there, even though 4 of the towns in this video, there is no one there, but they are incorporated. So that's a strange, unique thing. You'll have to watch obviously to the end if you haven't seen the videos before to see why there's no one there and why there's still a town. What would be your favorite town in this list? Mine would probably be Wiseguy. And I love this shirt because it has a little 1 right there, Nebraska's smallest, and that's 1 person. And I got to meet her and we did an interview, which you'll see. And even though my microphone had struggles, it was still a great interview and it was awesome to meet the 1 resident of Wiseguy, Nebraska. Really a special moment in the history of my channel to be able to do that. When I posted my first smallest towns video, it was Kansas, and I only had 374 subscribers. So probably many of you have not seen the full videos. And so if you haven't, there's a playlist in the description and you can go back and watch any of those. They're all, I think, pretty interesting. They're a lot of fun for me to put together. But in this one, we're gonna trim the fat. We're gonna take out the 9 large towns of the 10, and even though they're really tiny little towns, and we're just gonna leave the smallest incorporated town of every state that I've done. I plan to do more of these videos in the future. At this time, I have a really busy schedule, not able to spend the time to go out to those places and take the days it takes to get to all those little dots on the map. But this summer, hopefully I'll get out and get a few more. The goal is to eventually go to all the states and document the smallest towns. And it's a fun adventure whenever I'm able to do that. And in this video, we're gonna do like the other videos where we go from the largest small town to the tiniest. So we're gonna start at Arizona and Winkleman, because that was definitely the largest by far of any of the towns on this remaining list.
We made it to our smallest town, incorporated town in Arizona, Winkleman. And I'm on the historic bridge that was built in 1916, no longer used for vehicles, right near where the road comes into Winkleman. And it's a pretty cool spot, especially for our last town on this list. Now, number 3 on the list was Hayden. You remember that town? Who could forget it? And Winkleman literally is right next to Hayden. Their town signs kind of go almost back to back with each other. The 2 of the smallest towns in Arizona, 2 of the 3 smallest towns are right here next to each other. So this was settled like the 1870s, but then when the mining came around, it became more of a, support or supplemental kind of town for Hayden, and because that's obviously where all the mining is. You can see Hayden on the drone shots. You'll see the big towers, the smelting towers, I guess you would call them. And so it's so close. People would live here, maybe drive over there. The biggest employer here is the school district, so there's not a ton of jobs that are normal traditional jobs that you'd see in small towns or towns of any size. And so, it became incorporated, it was disincorporated and incorporated again, and has had population figures go up and down. and is now the smallest town in Arizona. So we'll give you a little tour of Winkleman. A lot of old buildings, but there's more activity here kind of than in Hayden, which is more just kind of feeling like a normal small town, although lots of abandoned things to see too. This is in Hayden right here, technically, right near the town boundaries. And there is Winkleman down below. Welcome to the smallest town in Arkansas, Victoria, with a population of 20. And, you know, this is kind of a unique story in a lot of ways. The way this area got organized was that there was a guy named Robert Wilson, and he had this kind of idea to buy up a bunch of land that wasn't being used. It was kind of like swampland, and he bought up tens of thousands of acres. And he created little towns, Victoria, one of them, in this county, and as you know, like big, giant plantations. And Victoria was actually his sister, and then he had a daughter who he also named Victoria, and she married a guy with the last name of Wesson, W-E-S-S-O-N, and I'm sitting here in front of this Wesson Farms building, which is actually the post office. I'm assuming it's like a city hall as well, looking inside. And if Wesson sounds familiar, it's because he was an heir to the firearm dealer Smith & Wesson. So I just got kicked out of Victoria. I was sitting there in front of the administrative building, and a lady came up and said this was privately owned and not allowed to be here. Although, I mean, I can be on the road, you can drive through, but I'm not allowed to, I guess, get out and explore. So I'll stay on the road and take some pictures and videos. But getting back to finishing the story about Victoria, so Smith & Wesson, you know, the heir Wesson, married the daughter of Robert Wilson, and so that's then they started Wesson Farms. And this is what what this is here now. They decided to incorporate, the town decided to incorporate in 1966, and had a couple hundred people, and has dwindled quite a bit, down to 20, obviously. So almost a ghost town, but a very unique ghost town. There are a lot of houses that are nice. Obviously, this is, privately owned, so these places are going to be nice. This isn't a regular town that has gotten small into nothing. So yeah, well, let me show you a little bit of what I can of Victoria before I get kicked out again. We have made it to number 1 on the list, Marine Land, Florida, population 15. And, you know, like the last couple towns that was around a theme park, this one is too, but it's very, very different. This one is in a very unpopulated area of Florida. We're about an hour north of Daytona Beach, and we're a little bit south of St. Augustine, and it's kind of an unspoiled area in a lot of ways. As you go up and down the coast here on A1A, there's a lot of little beach towns, and you get to here, and it's just pretty quiet and beautiful. And the town was started just like, you know, with Disney in those towns because of the Marine Land Park here. And I realized that I've been here before. When I was a little kid, I always saw this picture of me in what turns out was Marine Land when I was really little. And yeah, I didn't realize it literally until I got here that I had been here a long, long time ago. Because there's not much else here besides Marine Land. There are some hotels and places to stay, I'm sure, as you're a tourist that wants to come and be a little bit more of a quiet area. I don't know where the people necessarily live. When you drive around, it just feels like a kind of, you know, laid back beach community to hang out and get away from the hustle and bustle, but also be near the beautiful beach. The town was incorporated in 1940, and Marine Land was originally named Marine Studios. And there's a lot of underwater filming that happened here, and it was like the first time that the public could get real up and close to that kind of stuff. And so it was a pretty groundbreaking area back in the 40s, and the population has been really small of the people that live here. It's been in single digits for many of the decades, and a high of 31 and now at 15. So pretty interesting town to end our list. Really, really beautiful part of Florida. We have made it to the smallest town in Illinois, Valley City. And this is downtown Valley City. And it's actually got a pretty interesting history. We're right here along the Illinois River, kind of just back over there. And there was originally a community called Griggsville or Griggsville Landing. So there's a Griggsville down the way of town, but originally there was, you know, along the river here, steamboats would come through here. That was the way of transportation in the early 1800s. And so there's a Griggsville Landing, and just kind of down south a little bit, and maybe half a mile. And then they built a railroad through here, and so this became kind of the main economic center of this area. Actually, I drove down the way, and there's a kiln and a little historical marker sign. So down a significant back road to get down there. And so it's something to check out if you're here. There was Apple Incorporated here. Now, not the Apple that you think of today, but there were orchards here. And there was a company called Apple Enterprises or something like that. And it eventually got bought out by the Kraft Company. So it was one of 14 companies that J.L. Kraft of, you know, you've heard of Kraft Foods. And so, yeah, and that was right here in the smallest town in Illinois currently. The population, there's no population figures from 1880 to 1960, so hard to know how big it was. I think that it had a decent size, probably a couple hundred people. And, you know, after modern technology with certainly the river not being as important for transportation, and then just being very kind of out here in a desolate area, population dwindled, and it's been pretty small for several decades. It was the smallest town a few decades ago, and then one of the surveys, one of the census results, Kaskaskia, was the smallest town, and then now we're back to Valley City being the smallest town. Pretty interesting. There are these couple buildings in the downtown area. It looks like a quarry or something. Maybe is still an active business of some sort around here, and a couple modern buildings. But yeah, pretty cool to finally, we made it to the smallest town in Illinois, and this is it. We have finally made it to the smallest town in Iowa, Leroy. And this is a great small town. Sometimes I've done these videos and the smallest town is kind of odd for a reason. There's no one there, or one person, or maybe there's some sort of, you know, it's through some sort of liquor sales that it was a town. But this is just a small town that has faded down to 11 people. And they got some cool stuff to see here. But first, the history of it, it was formed on the railroad, and they had, you know, a couple hundred people in the early 1900s that lived here. You can actually, as you're kind of going through what is probably the old Main Street, there's old sidewalks, and you can see where some of the buildings, some abandoned buildings are. Right behind me is the City Hall. It says population 34. That population was several decades ago. You know, just over time got smaller and smaller. And was in 2010, it was tied for the smallest town with Beaconsfield, the last town we were at, and then it's gotten smaller down to 11. Besides these kind of abandoned buildings on the main street, there's an old school that really stands out as you come into town. It looks like probably is a, you know, privately owned at this point, and they have a great sign. So obviously there's the 11 people that live here have some pride in their town. So very cool, great way to end the series about the smallest towns in Iowa. The smallest town in Kansas, population an estimated 10. just before sunset. It's really pretty. Hopefully I can show it to you on a nice drone shot. But looking around, it's like a lot of these other towns. It's a lot of abandoned buildings, a few people living around here and kind of hanging on, but it is very eerie at sunset.
We'll see you.
Hello. Are you open? I'm at the end of a trip. I'm visiting the 10 smallest towns in Nebraska, and this is the final one. Can I ask you about the history of the town? So you're pretty famous, I hear.
Been a lot of publicity about me. I don't know if that makes me famous or not. Well, it was established along with when the railroad went through in the early 1900s, 1902 and 3. I've got pictures of, well, a fellow up in South Dakota whose grandfather helped build a lot of the buildings here in town. Brought us a bunch of pictures here a few years ago. So in the early 1900s, and that's when the railroad went through. And so that was when it was established. And at one time, there was a bank and a high school, a couple grocery stores, filling stations, garages, just kind of normal. I think the height of its population was between 140 and 150 at the height.
And so, have you always lived here?
Yeah, my folks moved to a farm about a quarter of a mile out of town when I was about a year and a half old. So this area has always been my home. I went to school here in town, a grade school from first grade through 8th grade. And there would have been 100 or better by then, because things were going downhill already. The bank was gone, the high school was gone. It was just grade school. But I'm sure, knowing how many kids were in school up here when I was, it would have been I would say around 100 people. Mm-hmm. Big families in those days.
Yeah.
Most of them.
And then why have you stayed?
Home. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I grew up here, and then I married a guy that, well, his family moved here when he was in the 4th grade and I was in the 3rd grade, and we just always knew each other. And then after he graduated, he went in the Air Force, and I taught school 1 year, and then I went and worked for Braniff Airline for a year, and then I come back, and by then he had been in about 3 years. So when he came home from overseas, then we got married, and he was at Offutt until he got discharged, but we didn't want to stay down there, so we come back up here. We farmed, and he worked construction and just various things, and we had a chance to buy the bar, but we went ahead and bought it, and I've been here ever since.
We have made it to the #1 spot, Mustang, Texas, and population 0. And this is a wild and kind of crazy story, and I'm in the vehicle because it's right basically on a busy and noisy highway 45 here in Texas. It's an unusual story, unusual history, and why it has 0 is kind of a mystery, but here's kind of the history of the town. So this county was a dry county, Navarro County. In 1973, there were some people that wanted to start a town so they could sell alcohol here, and since you couldn't do it anywhere else, it would become a center of a place where people could come buy alcohol. So in 1973, a group of people led by a William McKee incorporated the town of Mustang, and they opened a business here and probably a convenience store and a place to sell alcohol. And they did that until about in the 1990s, where other places were able to start selling alcohol as well. So it lost its status as kind of the place in this area to sell alcohol. And by the end of the 1990s, it had its highest population of 47. And then from there, it's gone down, but not for typical reasons. So in 2005, the owner of the town, basically William McKee, who started the town, was going to sell the property to a Tommy Sinclair for something like $600,000, and he had a club, which is actually still here, not open anymore. He had a club on the property, and so it was going to kind of become his town. The transaction didn't get completed, and Mr. McKee passed away before that could happen. So his wife took over kind of the responsibility of the town, but Tommy Sinclair sued because he was, thinking he should have ownership of the property. And amidst all this, about a year later, the city of Angus, which is basically right next to it here, was going to shut off the water because the town had not paid their water bill. So the wife of Mr. McKee paid the water bill herself. So the residents that were here were able to have water. So then in 2007 or 2008, there were 2 different parties that thought they should own this property. And so they had 2 separate elections to elect like a council. And within days, they both had elections. And after they had their election results, which were literally a handful of votes because there weren't that many people here, there were a dozen people here or so. And after those election results, they both claimed legitimacy of the government of Mustang. But another twist, 1 year later in 2009, Tommy Sinclair, who ran that club right there, he was indicted on murder of a man inside that club. And so when that happened, obviously there's confusion. What do we do? What's going on here? There's a population of 21 in the year 2010. And then in the 2020 census, it comes out that there's 0 people living here. And then an article comes out in the Dallas newspaper that Dallas Mavericks owner of the NBA, Mark Cuban, bought the property for $2 million. And in the article, he said he did it to help a friend. So I don't know which friend that was, but he did it to help a friend, and he had no plans for the future of the property. It's 77 acres, and now Mark Cuban owns all this land. It's officially in the eyes of the Texas census, it's still a town, and there's no one living here. What is Mark going to plan to do? Is there going to be any future for the town of Mustang, or is it just going to become a ghost town, an unincorporated community? there's not much here. There's a road that is private property on one end. On the other end, it says no trespassing. LC Lane, and then it's Ned Lane. So maybe Elsie and Ned were farmers that lived here. I don't know. I'm assuming Cave was named after a cave, but I don't know that either. There's not much information online except for that it was incorporated in the 1980s, had a population of about 10, went to 7 and then to 5, and officially now the population is 0. Last town on the list, Goss, Missouri. Actually, just a couple miles from Florida, Missouri, where Mark Twain, the birthplace of Mark Twain, and not too far from our last one, Cave, Missouri. Goss was named after an early settler named Goss, and it was settled in the late 1800s and had a post office until 1954. Never got very big. Is right here along the railroad. Had maybe 30 to 50 people, and but it was a community. The interesting thing about Goss, and probably appropriate that it's our last one on the smallest towns list, is that not only was it 0 in this census in 2020, but it was also 0 in the 2010 census. So it's been 0 for quite a while. There's only thing left is looks like an old building, kind of broken down, and there's some houses across the street, but that's not part of Goss. So this is just Goss between the railroad and Highway 24 on the other side. So a beautiful area, but not much going on in Goss. Welcome to the smallest town in the world, Hoot Owl, Oklahoma. There's not much here. As I was doing research for the smallest towns in the state, Hoot Owl, Oklahoma, and its population of 0 obviously stood out. There wasn't a lot of information online except a short Wikipedia page and one article from 2010 about some of the history of the town. The internet said Hoot Owl was located a little bit east of Tulsa and down a couple of windy back roads. So if you drive down the road to where the map says Hoot Owl, Oklahoma, you'll eventually get to a no trespassing gate that has a mobile home park. And so I drove up to it. I found a mailbox that says Hoot Owl, Oklahoma on it. So obviously I know I'm in the right place, but there are people that live right here on the edge, I guess, of what you would call Hoot Owl. So how does a town have a population of 0? I tried to find this out online. I called the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. They didn't know. And so I thought, well, I need to come out here to Hoot Owl, Oklahoma, and try to figure it out myself. So this town was incorporated in the late 1970s by a family of 3, and they did that to keep people off of their property. The bank around here was going to foreclose on the property, and so the family was going to dissolve the town, and so they had an official vote, and obviously the family voted to dissolve the town. But for some reason, the bank decided not to dissolve the town, so they challenged it in court. And the Mays County District Court ruled in favor of the bank, and so it kept Hoot Owl technically as a town, even though the family was going to sell the property and move away. Someone else bought the property. They wanted to use the property maybe someday as a retirement place or a weekend retreat for their family or something like that. And then that's about all you could find anywhere online. So as I was walking around exploring, trying to figure this out, a car pulled up and rolled their window down and asked me kind of what I was doing, and I explained, and they told me the story. And so this trailer park is considered in Salina, which is the nearest town to here, and beyond this trailer park, through private property still now, is the town of Hoot Owl, of which there used to be a house, but now there's nothing. I guess that decomposed, and they had to end up tearing down the house. But the people that own the property live in this little grouping of mobile homes and plan to build a house where the original house was in Hoot Owl and maintain it as a town. So as the population is 0 in 2020, at some point this couple plans to build a house and the population will, I guess, go up to 2. Don't know when that'll happen, but technically Hoot Owl still has 0 people. As of 2020, is tied for at least the smallest town in the world. It can't get any smaller than 0. I thought about getting the drone and trying to get an aerial view of Hoot Owl, but the lady I talked to said there was nothing there, and I thought, well, maybe it's best that Hoot Owl remains a mystery until the owners want to open it up for others to see. So, but a fascinating footnote in the smallest towns in Oklahoma.